someone on the. Hey, Ben, can you hear me okay? Or he might not be there. Can someone on the, on the Teams meeting, let me know if you can hear me.
Yes.
You're off mute. Maybe you need to change a microphone. You guys can hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
Yes, can you hear me?
Nobody wants to talk on.
We're talking.
Perfect, thank you. Confirmation confirmed. All right. So what we're gonna do real quick is just go around, do a quick introduction. We'll go through the executive team here at the table. And then we'll actually go and also introduce the folks that are sitting in the room. So just your name, affiliation would be great. Again, I'm Kurt Steele. I should say again, I didn't introduce myself. I'm Kurt Steele. I'm the Flathead Forest Supervisor and the current chair of the NCDE subcommittee. So we'll go, Adam, do you?
Good morning, Adam Zerenner, the Montana Fish and Wildlife Service Field Supervisor.
Morning, I'm Dylan Tavish, Montana Fish, Wildlife and Parks Regional Communication and Education Program Manager out of Kalispell and serve as the Information, Education and Outreach Chair for the NCDE.
Good morning, I'm Ivy Galing. I'm Kurt's executive assistant and just here to help with tech support.
Morning, Seth Gardner, District Ranger out of Eureka.
A research biologist with FWP. I'm an advisor.
Morning, I'm Randy Arnold, Regional Supervisor for Fish, Wildlife and Parks for our administrative region.
Morning, David Diamond. I'm the Executive Coordinator of the Interagency Grizzly Bear Committee, and pleased to be here with the NCDE.
Hillary Cooley, Fish and Wildlife Service, Grizzly Bear Recovery Coordinator.
Gary Bertolotti, Fish, Wildlife and Parks, out of Great Falls, Regional Supervisor, Vice Chair of the.
Excellent. And I did forget, Dylan, we're trying to record this, correct?
That's what, yeah, Ivy and I are
So-
kind of talking through. It might not let us for some reason. I can't figure out why.
Okay, well, we might not be able to record this. What I'll say also on the folks online, we're already having some internet technical issues, so we're just gonna keep going forward. Hopefully, we don't have too many issues moving forward, but we'll do our best to try to include you. So with that, we'll go around the room, starting in the back, and we'll work our way up the front if we can.
Steve Ellis, I'm just Eric.
Kathleen Trevor with the state of Idaho.
Fort North with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service for the Bear Recovery Program.
Eric, what I'm Fish, Wildlife, Parks, and Recreation.
Student values.
Kyle York, Fish, Wildlife, Parks, and Kalispell.
Board Events, Fish and Wildlife Service.
Jeff Ford, Black Creek Chargers. Elon Vegas, Fish, Wildlife, Parks.
Amber Portman, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. Percy Lambert, USDA Wildlife Services, based on Kalispell.
Andre Trickle, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, there you go.
Brad Davis, Fish, Wildlife, and Parks. First of all, I'm ready Fish, Wildlife, Parks.
Village. Aaron Edge, Tigers Wildlife,
James Stonko, Montana Fish, Wildlife, and Parks, Missoula. Mike Rader, Independent Consultant, Missoula. Jim Williams, good to be back.
I tried to retire. I'm in the land trust. I'm part of the Rockies and we are involved with landowner land groups and carnivore conflict reduction tools. So it's exciting to come here. So, oh yeah.
Bonnie Rice with Sierra Club based in Bozeman. Jocelyn LaRue, Western Watersheds Project, based in Missoula.
Chad White, Montana Fish, Wildlife and Parks, and showed up. Dave Kemp, Forest Service biologist, that showed up. Joshua Cox, and so here as well.
Toby Boudreau with Idaho Fishing Game.
Mark Ruby, Wildlife Program Manager, Black Forest.
Lori Roberts, Montana Fish, Wildlife and Parks. Yannick, GIS specialist, Lightning National Forest, Tree. I'm not contagious, I'm just a couple. I asked the doctor. Thanks. You're cheating.
Excellent. I don't, trying to figure out how we can do it online. Ivy, can you pull up the participation, the people list? Just go to the last two. Yep. All right, if you all can go in order, you should be able to see that online, I believe. Maybe we won't be able to do that. Tim, we'll start with you. Okay, we'll move on to Arlene.
This is Arlene Montgomery with
And
Friends.
here's the challenge with online. We'll go to Brian.
Brian Balmer, Fish and Wildlife Service, Helena.
Thank you, Arlene. Okay. Excellent. Is that Brittany?
Brittany Rosas, Vital Ground Land Trust out of Missoula.
Okay, we're gonna go to Ben.
Can you hear me?
Excellent, thank you, Brittany. Ben,
You can't hear me? No audio.
I can hear you now.
Ben Conrad, Deputy
Conrad.
Office Supervisor for Montana Ecological Services. Adam's our rep
I hear
today.
you, Ben,
on
thanks.
monitoring.
Rosie,
Okay.
Rosie Costin, People and Carnivores out of Bozeman.
Yeah, Ben, you're pretty broken. We're gonna keep. Okay, Stephen. Stephen Cross.
Wildlife technician out of Glacier National Park.
Chris.
Chris Forrestall, Montana Department of Natural Resources and Conservation.
That Tabith, or Tabith?
Hi, Tabitha Graves. I'm with
Great.
I'm with USGS stationed up in West Glacier. Good to see you all.
We've met before. Sorry, I butchered your name. Amy.
Amy Jacobs, I'm with the Forest Service Region 1 Threatened, Endangered and Sensitive Species Office.
Excellent. Benjamin. Getting close. Kari.
Good morning, everyone. This is Carrie Kingery with the Tribal Wildlife Management Program for Confederated Salish and Kootenai Tribes.
We're gonna keep going down the list. Keith.
Keith Hammer with Swan View Coalition up here in the Big Fork Kalispell area.
Excellent. Thanks, Carrie. Thanks, Keith. Christine.
Christine Ackland, Northern Rockies attorney from the Center for Biological Diversity based in
Then
Missoula.
Carly, you're up next.
Hey, this is Carly Lewis with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service out of Missoula.
Thanks, Christine. Carly, and then Luke's up next.
Luke Lamar, Swan Valley Connections and Swan Valley Bear
Luke,
Resources.
And then Rebecca's up next.
Rebecca Lyon, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, Grizzly Bear Recovery Project.
Hey, Rebecca. Oh, perfect. Thank you. I was trying to figure out. Okay, Mary.
Yeah, good morning, subcommittee. My name is Mary Price. I'm a biologist and a member of the public. Thank you.
All right. Unfortunately, I can see that the technology is going to be challenging. We're just going to have to live with it. All right, if I missed you in the call out, if you can put in the chat, that would be helpful. Again, apologize, we're having some technical difficulties. Normally, we just have the executive committee, kind of the ones that are in discussion, and then if we have time available in the time slot, we will invite the public or anybody that's sitting in the room or the chat room or the teams. And it will be a public comment period at the end of both days. So if we don't get to you during the topic itself, please keep your questions and we'll try to get to you at the end of the day. So with that, I'm gonna kick us off with the science team update. You bet. To Ivy. That's one. Appreciate that.
So again, I'm Cecily Costello. I work for Montana Fish, Wildlife and Parks, and I oversee the monitoring program in the NCDE, and I'm the chair for the science committee. And we had a meeting in person with some people coming remotely on the 27th of October. And see the name of it. We had a really good turnout. It was a really productive meeting, and I just want to go through all of the things that we talked about. And there's quite a bit.
I will try the Ivy.
Oh, it's working. Yes. Is the, it's just the.
Maybe we can. I don't think try to put it like this, make a switch.
I could do that.
Then Bill, we can put yours up there. Scared. Check work. Yeah.
You got to get
We're down.
We reviewed 2 external study proposals. We reviewed 6 studies that are currently trying to collect those sort of samples for the study. And then we can also look at hair, blood, fat, and tissue samples from dead bears when there's mortality and it's a relatively fresh carcass. And we can use those for metal and organic analyses. Dr. Ballmer came and told us that he was coming with his own funding. And he was applying for a U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service Ecological Services grant, which is his proposal is being put in December of this year. And he's hoping that he get the money for this. So everyone at the meeting was positive about trying to provide these sort of samples to the study. And so we're probably going to be a cooperator in this. The second external study proposal we got was from a large group of collaborators that have been working within Canada to try to look at landscape genetic connectivity. And they asked if we were interested in, basically collaborating on the study and extending it a little bit down into Montana. Go ahead. Their objective is to use individual-based genetic relatedness between different pairs of individuals, and then use a least cost path analysis to kind of look at the landscape that occurs between those two individuals, some of which might be from different populations. And then they would use that to identify important dispersal corridors. Now, when we spoke to them, we wanted them to understand that for the most part, we don't have actual individuals that are moving between ecosystems at this point in the lower 48. And so our interest would be more in looking at how our bears in the NCDE connect with bears in Canada. And so so we agreed that we thought that kind of all go into that. This first one, we essentially developed the models. We took the bears that had GPS collars from the NCDE and we created models, movement models. These are step selection functions. And then we simulated them across the NCDE. And as you can see in this little inset map, we basically just let the bears walk and then we would determine how many times they cross different pixels. Then we kind of just broke it off into the area of the DMA and we divided it into 10 quantiles, which you can see high use to low use, with the low use being blue and the high use being yellow. And that's kind of dividing the area into the most used to least used areas in the DMA. And then we overlaid that with with other GPS locations that were not used in the models so that we could test to see how well it worked. And it had very good fit. And so that's what this first paper is about. That one is currently available. And anyone who's interested, I can probably get it to you. We were also interested to see how well the model worked in a larger landscape. So we did the same process, but we did it in the Yellowstone ecosystem, the Cabinet Yaak, and the Selkirks. So we took our model, we applied it to the landscape in those ecosystems, and then we applied their GPS locations on top of that to see how well it fit. And again, it had relatively high fit. The bluer areas in those maps on the bottom show where the fit was really good. The yellow areas are areas where it didn't fit quite as well, but for the most part, it does seem like it's really estimating how bears are moving through the landscape. And then the final part of it is, of course, to try to use that model to predict how bears are going to use the landscape and move from one ecosystem to the other. This is just a little bit of a teaser of our draft map that we produced at this point. We are not going to share this any further than this right now because it is still in review. But once it is reviewed and or accepted and in publication, we will make that map available for all kinds of uses for conservation groups and for management. This is another study that is in progress and we're hoping to finish up soon, at least the first part of it. We wanted to use radio collar activity data to identify den partition events and to determine the denning chronology of grizzly bears. And these are a couple examples of how we do that. This is a set of activity data from 3 different winter periods for the same individual. And what we noticed is that when the bears had a when bears came out of the den with cubs and we looked at their signature, they had this little spike. And so what essentially we found is that spike appears to be associated, we're assuming that it's associated with the actual birth event. And it looks very different from the years when they don't have cubs. And so what we did is we took known data from the NCDE where we knew a bear had cubs or we knew they didn't have cubs. And then we made up a way to distinguish these little blips in the activity data. And then we compared it to blind data from the Yellowstone ecosystem and from the Cabinet Yaak and from the gates of the Arctic up there in Alaska to see if it would work. And so far it's working really well. It's not 100%, but it has pretty high accuracy at estimating. That's the first part of it. And then we have another way of looking at activity data where we use what we call a change point analysis, and it kind of divides a time series into different time frames. And when this really low period, it kind of estimating relatively well the denning chronology of bears from the collar data. Another study that we are kind of just getting started is looking at analyses of natal dispersal of bears in the NCDE. We have a pretty large sample of genetic data from roughly like 1,500 bears, 1,800 bears that we have actually captured, that we know ages, and oftentimes we have pretty good location data on where they live. And so we're going to use that information to do parentage analysis and look at where their natal range was, compare that to where they are at different ages, and just try to get some really good information on dispersal patterns of bears in this ecosystem. This graph on the bottom is preliminary data that we've done so far, where you can see that with age, males are moving further away from their natal area compared to females. And then they do steady out after a while. So anyway, we want to look at that to understand what the likelihood of dispersal outside of the DMA is, just for understanding connectivity. But we also want to use that so that we can allow for dispersal outside of the DMA as one of the parameters that goes into our estimates of the population size, because of course, we know that bears are actually being born in the NCDE and then moving out, and they actually should be subtracted from our estimate of the population if we're using birth rates as our way of the population growth.
I'm gonna pause right there real quick. We're
Yeah.
gonna try to screen share to see if we can let everyone online see your thing. So we're gonna do a little test real quick.
Oh, okay. They're not seeing this?
No.
Oh, shoot. That's too bad. Yeah. I should say, as we're talking, that I'm going through a lot of different topics, so please interject if you have a question about something. Don't wait till the end. Just ask. So, and if anyone has a question about something I've already talked about, we can cover that.
Cecily, you cut out for the first probably 2 topics that you were going to hit, I know. Can you just real quickly hit what those were?
Okay. So the first topic was the contaminant study. Is that the one? So what we're gonna do is look at contaminants that might be coming from mining sites across Montana obviously within grizzly bear range. And we're looking at heavy metals and organic compounds. And we're gonna do that using samples that we have in hand that go back a decade or 2. And then we're also gonna start collecting samples from captured bears and mortalities for that. The second topic was a proposal to extend some work that they're doing in Canada on genetic connectivity, and include the NCDE so that we can look at how much connectivity we have between the NCDE and populations up in Canada.
Thanks. I think that catches people up.
Sure. Yes.
When you were looking at the mothers giving birth in the den, you mentioned blind data. What data is that?
So what we do, it's similar to what we do at the NCDE, and each year in the spring, when we have radio collared bears, we try to locate them as soon as they come out of the den, as early as possible, so that we can actually get a visual observation on them. We do it with a helicopter, which is most effective up here in the NCDE. In the other ecosystems, they use airplanes, but we try to get their, the earliest possible observation of their reproductive output. And so if they have cubs, then that's obviously one that we can mark down as having had cubs. If they don't have cubs, if they're alone, we can't really say for certain whether or not they did have cubs. But if they have yearling offspring or 2-year-old offspring with them, then we assume that they did not have cubs. So those were the samples that we would use in the blind samples, how well it works.
Okay, I think we're good. Do you mind asking Cecily, can we see your demo?
Can you guys see my screen?
Yes, we can. Thank you very much. We're seeing it now.
Wait, I'm going back and show any visuals, it's just.
Let's keep going.
Okay. All
Hey,
right.
folks online, I apologize. We're doing the best we can with trying to do the hybrid model. This is just kind of how it works, but we got to keep moving. We got a tight agenda.
And from this map that there are lots and lots of grain beds out there, and the bears often come and feed on the spilled grain that occurs around them. Sometimes they do break into them, and so we're interested. Really is out there for the bears on the east front, and so we actually collared a number of bears specifically for this study, captured research bears. Some of them live outside of the DMA, so they don't really count toward our trend model. or our trend sample. But we're going to look at the frequency and duration of grizzly bear visits to these different, sites. And then we want to try to evaluate whether or not bears are just feeding on this opportunistically, or if this is something that bears are coming back to repeatedly. And if they're looking for it as one of their food sources. And then if we do determine that bears are kind of coming to feed on these ones, what are the characteristics of the bins that are most likely to get visited by bears? So those are some of the things we want to do. I should also mention that this map of all these grain bins is mostly because of Lori and Wesley. They actually got onto Google Earth and put a little pin on each time that they could see a grain bin. So that's a lot of work right there to make that map. Okay. Another study out there on the East Front, which uses partially some of the same bears that we captured for this research for the grain bins. Some of them overlap this area that we're working in as well. This is a study that was started by Wesley, and he's collaborating with Julie Young and Jenny Sherry. And they're looking at the use of livestock guarding dogs or guard dogs for keeping bears away from oftentimes these areas with grain bins. Also, they want to look at the efficacy of livestock guard dogs at deterring grizzly bear activity near residential grain attractants. And then they want to see what sort of interactions actually happen between the bears and the dogs, and people are able to see it. So they've actually essentially combined the data for that, and they've sent it off to the people, to Julie and her students, and they're going to start analyzing it right about now. So we should probably have some results on that sometime in the near future. Okay. Another study that we have that we're collaborating on, and this is a very large study. This is just providing a few samples from the NCDE, but this is a grizzly bear genomics project where they're trying to look at the whole genome sequencing for grizzly bears throughout North America. They have samples from all over the area, and they want to have a reference genome, and then they want to try to see if they can distinguish different populations and get markers that will allow them to distinguish different individuals. So this is essentially moving into a new way of doing genetic analysis right now. What we have always worked with is microsatellites. This is something that they call SNPs, these single nucleotide polymorphisms. This is kind of the more modern way. And one of the reasons that we are interested in working on this project is the turnaround time and the analysis for this can be very rapid. When we send our samples in, it always takes over a year for us to get them back. And so we're always a little behind in terms of knowing the information from them. This is supposedly the way of the future, and there's potential for, really fast analysis. So that's why I'm contributing to this. Okay. All right. This is an internal study proposal that we're looking at right now. This has not been approved, but everyone is interested in taking part in this. We might try to do this for a PhD program for Milan, who works for us on the trend monitoring program, and we would be working with Sarah Sells from the University of Montana, who also, of course, worked on our connectivity modeling as our primary investigator. But we're interested in looking at the effect of forest management and wildfires on grizzly bear habitat use. There's been a lot of that recently, and that's what we're looking at. So you can go ahead. I'll make this fast.
Since we're on that one, is there any way some of that road data as well?
Yes, and I was trying to make the little bullets as simple as possible, but we are going to account for road effects in all of our modeling.
Thank you.
All right, we're having some issues again, so try to quickly pivot.
Well, I probably know what's on the last one. So the last slide is basically we to look at things that we needed to, essentially related to our population monitoring and the conservation strategy. The first one is the IPM, which is a big project that we're working on with the Speak Up guys from the University of Montana. And we're also working with the study team in Yellowstone. Yeah, that's fine. And anyway, right now the IPM is working very well for Yellowstone. Yellowstone has they actually have data that they can put in on an annual basis because they count unduplicated females with cubs, and that gives them an estimate of the number of females in the population, which is a really nice way of kind of anchoring the IPM. We don't really have those kind of data, but we're working on possible inputs into that. So that's where we are with that. It's still a work in progress, but we are definitely making progress. So we're happy about that. We talked a little bit about remote camera work and hair corral work. As you remember, I talked about last spring, we had tried to put some cameras out. Well, we did put some cameras out in a bunch of wilderness bear management units to try to see if we could use them to get observations of females with cubs, because in the wilderness areas, we have very low observation rates, obviously. We did get a number of observations of bears, but not cubs or any offspring. So we're probably not going to continue that for now. It didn't really seem like it was that much of a good use of our resources at this point. But we did talk about potentially using this as a way to supplement some of the detections that might be good additions to the IPM. We're not making any decisions at this point. It was kind of just a point of discussion. And then we talked again about stable isotope analyses. We have contributed to these analyses in the past. Justin Teisberg from the Fish and Wildlife Service, who mostly works in the Yak ecosystem, has been our person that's doing these or State University lab. For a while, they didn't really have the option to do that. Their program wasn't running, but it's up and running again. So we're probably going to start doing a little bit more of that again. And there is one more. We also thought that we really are we're under the conservation strategy. We're supposed to be looking at body condition as a way to look at habitat quality and make sure that the bears are getting the calories they need. It's something that we haven't actually reported on, mostly because the computer and ready to go and make sure that that's something that we start doing. And that's it.
Any questions from the NCDE members?
Yeah. Well, excuse me. I'm new to this, and so all of this is super interesting to me. And I'm also wondering, do you guys do like an annual report or like 5 years, or just like something fun?
We do an annual report on our trend monitoring, and that I didn't really include, what we do for trend in this presentation, but we radio collar and monitor a sample mostly of adult females, or females, I should say, not necessarily adult, and a few males. We look at their reproductive rates, their survival rates, and use that in a population model to try to get the trajectory of the population and a population estimate. And in terms of the conservation strategy, we use that to estimate the probability that the population is above 800 bears. And we're supposed to maintain a 90% probability. And the report, our annual reports are available on the FWP website.
Arlene had a question from the chat. Yeah, I'll get to Arlene. Let's keep going with the NCDE. Go ahead, Scott, you got something?
Yeah, I was wondering, Cecily, I know Sarah published the first of your 3 modeling and movement papers. When do you, any idea of timeframes for the second 2?
So the second one is actually, we got reviews back and they just asked for revisions. They're pretty minor. So that's actually going to go in probably early. The third one, is still in review. So we don't know, you know, that's kind of dependent on the reviewers, but we're really hoping that we'll get some quick turnaround. I'm hoping by spring that Sarah can come in and present the whole thing and have it available.
Is she primary author on 3?
She is.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
And one thing I wanted to mention about that modeling is, she figured out some math related to the implementation of the random walks that makes it, far more, precise than some of the random walk analysis that we did in the pack. So I think it's going to be even more useful than models.
Any NCDE member, any other questions, comments? All right, sounds like, well. Yeah, got 7 more minutes, so we'll see if we, from members, sounds like Arlene might have a question. Jump spot right up the get-go.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Arlene, if you can hear me.
Yes, the question, I didn't have a question on the presentation. I couldn't hear most of it. So that's why I raised my hand, was to let you know that it was not audible for the public, a lot of it. And so that's all that I was trying to tell you.
Okay, thank you, Arlene. We did plug into the hard line, so I hope it's better from here on out. So let us know if it continues to be bad. I'm hopeful about the last 5 minutes was good. If it wasn't, we might have issues all day.
No, the last
And
bit
we will
was
post all
better.
Okay, excellent. And we will post all of the presentations online, like we normally do. And I do reading. We'll get recorded. So, okay, any members in the room? Any questions for Cecily? And say members, any other folks? All right. Now, maybe. Maybe by day 2, we'll have it all down then. There we go. That's news, our guinea pig. Failed miserably.
So you have 2 seconds, go first.
Yeah, that's great. She rolled with it well enough.
Good morning. I apologize for my voice, but if I have my mask on when it goes real bad and I can't talk very well, you won't hear me. So, I am sorry.
No worries.
I just need next to whoever's running.
We're making sure they can see it.
Yep, it should be good.
Yes.
So how do I get next? Fine.
Do you have a clicker?
No, I do not.
I'll be your manual clicker, I
All
guess.
right, that's good.
Yeah.
Between the 2 of you all, you're doing great. I'm glad we sat next to each other.
Sweet, thanks, sliders.
Maybe I'll be the clicker.
So I do all the habitat monitoring reports, the motorized access, development rec and grazing. They have all been completed for through 2021 for motorized access, 2020 for the development rec and grazing. Remember, they're every 2 years. So the next one's upper development recreation and grazing for calendar year 2022. That'll start in January. The reports are all posted on the NCDE webpage. You just need to scroll down to where it's policy management and resource reports. That's the web address if you need it. And thanks to Dave for getting those posted for us. Thank you. And next. I'm gonna do a little bit of different because it's you'll see the report that I normally give. But, what you guys think about this as we go through things. We've done 2011 to 17 and 19 and 21, so I've got several years now worth of looking at things, and so that's what I kind of want to ask you guys today. And I do want to thank Mark Rooney and Cicely for sitting down and kind of put some clarity in. Authorized access report, it's complete for all 126 subunits. All 126 met the conservation strategy or their forest plan, resource management plan, or park services plan, for guidelines for the motorized access. Next. Kind of comparing 2019 to 21, 46 subunits had a whole percentage change in either open, total, or core, or some combination thereof. Of those 46 subunits, 37 had updates and information, 11 had land exchanges in their subunits. Land either came into or out of federal or state ownership. For project implementation in 6 subunits. If you total 37, 11, and 6, you're going to realize that some subunits had some combination thereof of updates, land exchanges, or project implementation. So more than one thing goes on in any given subunit. It likes to get busy. And then I will move on to the next slide, please. Of those 46 subunits, you can see it across on the screen. 68 were individual changes, so 46 subunits, but there were 68 changes in open, total, or core. 73% of those had a change of only 1% of the subunit changed. 25% had a change between 2 and 5%, and 1% had a change between 6 and 8%. There were no changes greater than 9% on any of the subunits. And so you can kind of see where they are over there. There was a lot of change on the Blackfeet and the Rocky Mountain front. A lot of that is land exchanges, I should tell you. And then you can see them scattered all over the place on the rest of the subunits. Next slide. Secure course, that seems to be what everybody really wants to know. In 2021, we now have 4,035,334 acres, or 71% of the PCA is in secure core. From 2019, that's an increase of 10,688 acres. From 2011, that's an increase of 66,275 acres. I want you to kind of remember those numbers. Just remember that they were kind of large, okay? That's what I'm looking for. Any questions on that 2021 report, just on this report? Are there any questions from the managers at this point before I move on? You guys are doing okay? Right, next slide. So this is my question. What is important? From 2019 to 21, 46 subunits changed by how much? Versus 19 to 21, 6 subunits changed due to active management. Okay, I need to set a little bit of groundwork for you guys, because I don't know that everybody has the conservation strategy memorized. So next slide. There are acceptable changes that may adjust the baseline value when your total or your core. Those are updated or improved spatial or tabular data on motorized routes without an actual change on the ground. Key word there, with words, without an actual change on the ground. In other words, we improved our database. We said the spatial road alignment is off from the satellite imagery or LiDAR, and it should be over here instead of over here. We didn't change where the road was on the ground. We had a barrier at milepost 6.3, and we actually said it was at 6.6. Well, it's at 6.3. We updated our database. There's a change. So that is a lot of the changes you can have. Next one. Technology or projections changed. We had one of these when we had to go from NAD 27, which is a projection, to NAD 83. It's actually a datum shift. There's another one coming nationally. I think they keep stalling it because they don't know how to implement it. Really. I don't know how to do it. But those things could change your numbers. Because if you think of the datum says where it is in the world and how it's related to something else. And so that could change your numbers. That's a technology change. Next. Land is exchanged, acquired, purchased, and or sold. This happens quite a bit, particularly on the tribes where they're buying back land. It's happened a lot for the Lolo National Forest. It happened for the Flathead and the Lolo back in 2010 with that Montana Legacy Project. But the Lolo's been gaining a lot of land over time. So there's being exchanged in. So realize that that will change your numbers. That's changing the land and the roads that are on it. Next one. The road closure moved a short distance to a better location for public safety or improve enforcement or reduce vandalism. We've had a couple of these. Doesn't happen very often. The distance is a short distance, folks. You know, litmus test it. They're not moving it a mile. But that does happen because if they moved it just a little bit, either closer to the beginning of the road or closer to the end of the road so that they have a turnaround spot. Or that where it is right now, it makes it easier for cars to go around the gate. Maybe they need to move the gate a little bit. So it's harder to go around the gate just because of the topology. So that's what that one is for. Next. Changes to comply with federal laws. That is in there because I never know when something's going to come down from the federal law that says you have to do this, and it could change how we look at roads or do roads. Next one. Changes necessary to address human grizzly bear conflicts, human safety concerns, or resource damage. We've had a couple of these. This would be an example of the resource damage. Let's move the road away from the creek where we're getting sediment damage and it's harming fish. But that means the road gets moved and maybe we increase open, maybe we decrease open total. But that is an allowed one because we're having to deal with some sort of human safety concern, resource damage, or grizzly bear conflict. We've had a couple. Next one. Adjacent non-federal landowner made changes to their motorized access management and affected adjacent. This happens a lot. If you think about it, the standards apply to federal lands. The state has their own particular standards for motorized access. But what I usually talk about is the standard applies onto federal lands only. So when the adjacent landowner is allowed and can make those changes to theirs, that could have an influence on federal lands, and it happens a lot. Private landowner builds a road right on the inside of his property. When you buffer that for 500 meters for secure core, and the adjacent federal land, there's a decrease in secure core. Okay, so that happens a lot. Next slide. These are the ones that I have seen. And of these, the first two and the last one are the most common, which is updated, improved spatial or tabular data, land exchanged, and the adjacent landowner. Those are your biggie changes. They will change numbers. This isn't active road management for most of these. This happens to your baseline. If you think about, and I want to give you some examples of these, I'm going to group these into categories for you. Next slide. Updates to your tabular spatial interface. This is like the realignments, corrected closer device locations, improved closer device location, changes to private or state roads adjacent to federal lands. These are updates or to the database that happen all the time. Okay. The next category is land exchanges. Next slide, or this click, yeah. Land exchanges. These can be, you know, you're gaining land into federal or you're dropping land to federal, but you are adding land to if you gain the federal land gains, you're gaining the acres of that subunit that you're going to count in your calculations, but you're also gaining the roads on top. If it's exchanged out, you're losing those acres and you're also losing whatever the roads are giving you on top of that. So that's and the third category is project implementation. Usually this decreases open and total and increases core. As grizzly bears are still listed, projects are still consulted with you as a Fish and Wildlife Service. I want you to remember that. So as an example, here on the left, what you're seeing is spatial realignments. You can see the old road is the thicker road behind, and then you can see where the new road actually is. This is all looking at like nape imagery. Could also be coming from LiDAR. This is happening a lot on the Flathead, the Lolo. I'm waiting for the Kootenai to kick in. And it's going to be kicking in on the HLCs pretty soon. So this will change. I mean, if the road was here and now it's over here, that changes the spaghetti network. That will probably change your open total or core percentages. Example of land exchanges. You can either have land go into private ownership, comes out of private ownership. This happens to be over on the Blackfeet. Was private, now it's tribal in this particular case. And this one, that's the same thing, went to tribal. This was tribal and is now private. They go back and forth, okay? That will change your numbers every single time. Next one. This is the project implementation. I picked on Center Horse down on the Lolo. This is what they had in 2019. They implemented Center Horse
these roads went to decommissioned or they went to impassable long-term storage. They made the road impassable to all motorized traffic, including putt-putt bikes. Or they decommissioned the road and it's no longer on the system. So that decreased their core, decreases the road, didn't decrease core, sorry, my bad. Decreased the amount of roads that would be buffered for core, so their core increased. That's a project implementation. That's active management. Okay. Next slide. So of your 126 subunits, the other thing you need to realize is 18 are completely within Glacier Park. We really don't think the park will change their road management. They could, but we really don't think they change it very much. So 18 subunits are completely within Glacier Park. 6 are split between the Blackfeet Reservation and Glacier National Park. Blackfeet does not have the standards, so they're going to change up and down. All right, 4 completely Flathead Indian Reservation. Again, they don't have these standards. And 22 are 100% Forest Service wilderness, which is those dark green on that map. So of that, next slide, that leaves 76 subunits where a change is expected or could occur due to road management, due to active management by one of you. Okay. So if we looked at that, I'm going to hit this several times, but the 2017 report, this is where their changes occurred. I had changes here, all the way around, all up and down. The grayed out ones are those 18 park, have Indian reservation or 100% wilderness. This is where it was in 19 and then again in 2021. It moves around depending on who's doing active management of projects. Next slide. Another way, tabular 2017, 14 subunits had an active project. 8 had updates or land exchanges. In addition, and 38 had updates or land exchanges and 24 had 0. So in 2017, these are my subunits that changed. 14 with the project, but also of those 14, 8 had updates and land exchanges at the same time. 38 had updates or land exchanges, but no project. 24 had 0. In 2019, I had 6 with projects, of which of the 6, 5 of them had either updates or land exchanges in addition to that project. 31 had updates or land exchanges and 39 had 0 changes. 21, you had 7. All of them had other additional work. 34 and 35. So if I looked at that for 2017, those 14 subunits, it was 13 different projects. OMRD increased ranging from 2 to 10%. I need to explain that. One was a 10% increase from the Moose Post fire that's on the Flathead. That was done in 2002. It was signed in 2002 in the Werner Creek subunit, consulted through Fish and Wildlife Service, but it was finally implemented after 2011. So we had a 10% increase in the Werner Creek subunit of open. The other was a 2% increase from the Colt Summit project out on the Lolo. It was signed in 2011. It's in the Mission subunit. They moved a road to avoid fisheries and avoid bull trout. I know it was a bull trout. I think maybe it was, but they moved it to avoid fisheries. But the road being moved out increased their open by 2%. Project management. Total, they all decreased ranging from 1 to 10%. For that 10% one, about 1% was the decrease from the project. The rest of that, 2/3 was from road management, spatial realignments. Okay, core increased from 1 to 21% due to active management. Do you remember that I said, okay, from 2011 to 17, we gained 56,165 acres of secure core. Only 17,260 or 31% was due to active management by land management agencies. The rest of that increase was due to baseline acceptable changes, land exchanges, updates to the database, etc. Okay, so this is what startled me a little bit. Next slide. 2019, we had 6 subunits, 4 different projects. OMRD decreased in all of those cases from 1 to 6%. I had 1 increase from 1%. That 1% was, I cannot remember all of the details, sorry. Alice Creek subunit from the Blackfoot non-winter travel plan. They had a land exchange going on. And as part of that, what were they going to do with their travel management? And in that travel management on the Alice Creek subunit down here, they had a 1% increase in open. TMR decreased from 1% to 3%. That 2% increase was rather interesting. It's in the mission subunit on the Lolo, which is right here. The Colt Summit project area showed a decrease in total, but there were increases in the rest of the subunit that counteracted that. And so they had a net change of 2% increase in total. The project management decreased it. Okay. Core increased from 1% to 8%. Of that core that year, this was interesting. We had a 578 acre from 2017 to 2019. We had 578 acres decrease in core, but we had a total increase in core of 10,272 from active management. It's just a different way of looking at things. Next one. Last year, 2021, 6 subunits, 3 projects. OMRD decreased in all of them. TMR decreased in all of them except one. There was a 1% increase. The subunit had its Rice Ridge project, that big fire that the Lolo had. It's on the Swan subunit. And a decreased total with the Rice Ridge project. But the updates to the database that Alan was doing with all their realignments and correcting it, they had a net increase of 1%. Core increased from 1% to 2%. Again, the project management gave them 266 acres, which is only 25% of the increase of 10,688 acres that were due to everything else, baselines, things. So next, yeah, what does this mean? Next, yeah, projects. They're consulted with U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service because the bear is still listed at this point. They typically decrease open and total, they increase core. It is active management. We are doing something to the road system. That's what your projects do. The other side of that is your updates and land exchanges. They're constantly occurring. There's typically no change in road management on the ground. Remember, they can have that road management change due to, hey, we have the closure and we need to move it 1/10 of a mile to get a better turnaround spot. And owner DTM record that may increase or decrease. There's no rhyme or reason to this. I handed, and I still remember Cecily's face when I showed her the spreadsheet and showed her where all the changes were. And she's like, oh my God, how do we make sense of this? So this will happen all the time. This is why your reports, you will see numbers change over and over through time, and those are acceptable baseline changes. What I want to point out is your projects are active management, and for the most part, they are decreasing open and total, and they're increasing core. The ones that increased it had some other special case. And again, they're consulted through Fish and Wildlife Service. Next slide. So at this point, I want to take a break for questions because I'm going to change the topic. So if there's any questions on this part of what I gave.
You want to stick with members or open it up to
anybody?
Okay, let's start with the members. Any questions, Kathy?
I know that's a lot of stuff, sorry.
Okay, how about any from the general public or other folks that are here? I don't see any in the room. How about online? Probably easiest online folks to raise your hand and then Ivy can see it.
I have one comment in the chat from Scott Thompson. Said, please let Kathy know this is very much appreciated by those of us who use this information daily. The bios would you. Great work.
Great work, because I am retiring at the end of March 2024.
And Tabitha says, great presentation, Kathy. Very helpful to see how these are all occurring.
Okay. So again, this will be posted online so you guys can review it at your leisure. If I know I talk too fast, sorry. So this is my ASSL. The fall meeting is my annual, hey, this is what I did. This is what I want to do. Will you still give me some funding? So next slide. For 22 accomplishments, I completed the biennial motorized access monitoring for calendar year 2021. I provided assistance projects on various motorized access analyses. Some of that is still ongoing with the Lolo. I have begun documentation on what I do for the next person following me, because I can never remember it all at the end, and responded to questions and requests. I had a lot more of these than I expected this year. Next screen. For 2023, I will complete the biennial develop rec and monitoring, and for grazing. Well, we'll do the biennial develop rec, we'll do the grazing. I'll continue to do that documentation of workload, for handbook for the next person. And provide information or analyses as expected. As you guys all know, it's all done through agreements. They were all spent out in 2023. The request is 3,200 per unit. 10 contributors, BLM Fish and Wildlife Service, you guys all know who you are. And it provides for an opportunity about 32% of my time for 84 days. And what I need is, those of you that contribute in, are you all okay? You still, I mean, I know some of this has already moved on, but I still need to get the okay from everybody. Are we good with it? Still doing my funding?
I'll couch it as this. Any concerns?
But she's leaving. Sorry.
Good concern, Lori. I like it. Does any agency have any concerns with what's going on? So for the Forest Service, obviously, we've kind of gone to budget modernization, so it's all just kind of lumped together for us, but
I still keep track of that.
Yeah.
So, yep. So, are there any other questions that people have, or free to go before it's gonna start?
Not free to go. I think we want to take a minute to recognize the work you put into this, Kathy. Each time we update that we are going to pay you again, it's a reminder for us of where we'd be without you. So you have an amazing capacity for keeping track of this, and the long history and knowledge of that just shows up every time you present this. It's very difficult to keep track of this work, but I think today's presentation was particularly helpful because you paused to give us some of that context that this is not a static environment.
No, it's not.
And the work you do to keep that current is so helpful to us. So thank you very much.
I need to say thank you to a lot of people behind the scenes that work for you, all of you that provide me that data. I can't do it without their help. So there's a lot of people that work for you that I count on and say, hey, it's that time of year again. Can you review this? Can you send me your data? Can you answer this question? So I depend on a lot of other people. Thank you.
Comment or question?
Just a comment from Chris Forrestal with the DNRC. He says, we're great, Kathy. Good work.
Okay.
All right, thanks,
Right.
Kathy. Next on the agenda is Dylan and David on talking about information, education, and outreach update.
Boy, am I glad I didn't do a PowerPoint presentation. David, do you want to go first? How about?
Sure. Do you have the slides or is that?
Do I?
That's what you.
I mean, it's not a big deal. Can't pull them up. So
you can.
Yeah, once again, so David Diamond, with the Interagency Grizzly Bear Committee, just, Dylan's gonna give the information education outreach update from the subcommittee. So I work for the whole enterprise. I'm the one employee of the Interagency Grizzly Bear Committee itself. And so that means I work for the federal habitat managers, the state wildlife managers, that make up the group. And the mission, the second slide there, Ivy, is the recovery and delisting and ongoing conservation of grizzly bear populations. So the next slide, Ivy. I just want to give you the sort of the connectivity to the executive group, which is actually meeting next week in Bozeman. But they've had a couple of meetings this year already. In March, they had a strategic meeting where they continued this conversation back and forth with the subcommittees about some larger scale work and topics like information, education, outreach, conflict prevention and reduction, and also some of the science that you heard from Cecily and looking across the larger landscape with that work. And so they continued that in their summer meeting. In the summer meetings, they visit, they do field visits in the ecosystems. And so they were in the Selkirk Cabinet Yak in Padre, Idaho, and did a trip up to almost to the Canadian border. And one of the directions from the executives at that meeting was for the subcommittees such as this one to take another look at the conservation strategy. So you're going to have a presentation a little later today, just reviewing the history of the existing conservation strategies. And at the meeting this week, the Selkirk and Cabinet Yak agreed that they're going to create a team that's going to start to draft the first version of the conservation strategy for that geography. And then again, so the executives are meeting next week and are going to be looking ahead to this coming year and the 5-year plan. So next slide. And this is the end of the cycle of the subcommittee meetings. And then next slide. Just a reminder on, Kathy mentioned finding the habitat reports on the website. That's on the subcommittee page. So if you go to the NCDE committee page and go down to, we've got 2 sections of documents. One is meeting materials and one is policy management and reports. So you can find Kathy's reports there. But when you're looking for information that's coming in the future, the news and events tab is the place to go, and we update sort of save the date on the right-hand side. And then as the meetings approach, I will post the information on how to connect to it and then the agendas. We try to do it 2 weeks ahead. We were a little behind on the executive meeting, but it is now posted, so you can find the agenda for the meeting next week. And you also can join our little newsletter. Only a few of those will come a year to try to keep you up to date. So next slide. And then really, so this again for Kurt, for your agenda for later in the meeting, the executives I mentioned are going to be looking at the 5-year plan. And this is, part of what we want to do is hear from the subcommittee. What are the planned actions? What are the shared goals? You've got a lot of work in this subcommittee that is ongoing, that is essentially maintenance. You've made commitments, you've built incredible processes like the one that Kathy just reported on. So where are there, can we describe some of those and are there any things that are new or different going forward? And I know, Randy, when you were chair, you had looked at a number of different things related to conflict. And sort of, it's just a question of scanning it. From time to time, it's important to see, what are we doing? Is there anything we can stop doing? Is there anything we need to start doing? And that's kind of the conversation. So that's what I have.
Great, thank you, David. Right, let's move here. Get this thing. Stand in front of that. So thank you. Yeah, this is just going to be a brief update on information, education, and outreach work for the NCDE. The main disclaimer is that this is by no means everything that's going on across ecosystems and all the great work that's going on with different agencies and tribes and NGOs. And there's more work than we could get into a week's worth of a meeting to showcase. And so I want to make sure that you don't feel like this is, if you don't see something, it's because this is just a snapshot and really stuff that's associated with IGBC specifically. Because there's just great work happening on a daily basis. The bear managers are going to speak later, and they do a ton of that education outreach work as well. So they're going to highlight some of that. As the IEO chair, I kind of just try to wrangle some of the highlights from the past year for this meeting and talk a little bit about efforts that are going on. So I'm just going to run through a few of these. In the last couple of years, you might remember, we've talked a lot about the new audiences that we're trying to reach, and VRBOs are a big one. So we've tried to put together some ideas for effectively reaching the thousands of visitors who are coming into Montana and staying in our VRBOs, or even from within Montana who are coming into areas where they might not realize that grizzly bears could be right out their doorstep at these VRBOs. And so one, I think pretty neat progress we made in that realm is Daniel Euler, who is the IEO chair for Yellowstone Ecosystem Subcommittee, worked on this flyer that everybody hopefully received. And it's a really nice looking flyer that has a lot of great information. And I was able to get the Flathead County Planning Office to put one of these in every single VRBO. So every VRBO in Flathead County is kind of a pilot effort, is getting this flyer, hoping that, and a note essentially asking them to please keep this information displayed in their VRBO for when their visitors come. If they'd like more copies, they will get as many as they would like. So I'd like to give a shout out to Flathead County Planning Department for helping us in that effort. If this it seems to be working and it seems to be pretty cost effective. We're gonna then expand to all the other communities that have growing VRBO interests. So excited to just start trying to get information, just distribute that information directly to those audiences. Yeah,
Question for you on that, Bill.
Yeah.
In the effort to show that, hey, we're all in this together, would it be beneficial to have more names on the bottom of that?
yeah, it probably definitely would, and especially from an IGBC level. Yeah. So as we kind of expand beyond just this one little pilot one, it's a great idea. Secondly, Lori Roberts has done an immense amount of work as the IEO chair for IGBC on a million different things. And one of those has been working on distributing and supporting the development of brochures. So we got, I think, how many last year? Like 10,000 brochures printed and distributed to ecosystems across all the ecosystems. And those have been given out to agencies, NGOs, basically anybody, businesses, anybody who would like to have a really good handout with information on grizzly bears and bears in general. We've made those as available as possible. So encourage, if anybody here in the audience would like a stack, I've got a bunch of them here as well. We want to get these out into our communities as best we can. And so that's really been helpful. Up in the Flathead, another kind of neat effort that goes to, cities really helping and stepping up. Justine Valuers in Flathead, she helped work with City of Whitefish and City of Columbia Falls. City of Whitefish has implemented bear-resistant containers in all of the city. They've got 3,900 containers coming to all city residents in the City of Whitefish. And the city council approved adding that to just the monthly trash pickup. And so we're really excited to see those 95-gallon bear-resistant containers coming into the City of Whitefish, where we've had a lot of issues in recent years. And Justine worked really hard, speaking in front of the city council many times, I don't know how, and Eric Wenham was there doing it probably 20 years ago, and Justine took the baton recently. And so they've really been working hard to help educate that community up there, and kudos to Whitefish for listening and making it happen. So now this fall, they started implementing all city residents with bear-resistant containers, and also a shout out to Republic Services for helping make that happen. Columbia Falls, another one where Justine and Eric are really working with them to educate them about similar issues. I enacted an emergency ordinance this fall requiring food storage, and they are working with Justine and Eric to try to figure out a long-term solution that they can try to make work for their community. So really neat to see these communities step up and try to work on ways that will reduce bear conflict and increase public safety. So there's another one, just running through kind of some general highlights. Yeah.
What's the enforcement with those two, the Whitefish and the Columbia Falls order?
Yeah, I haven't checked with the cities. I know Whitefish struggled with it in recent years just because it's you could have a whole crew of devoted officers probably that would be busy checking those, but I've heard anecdotally that they've certainly been writing warnings to residents who beforehand were putting out their garbage beforehand. But I can't speak on information beyond anecdotally. But yeah.
So in the past, when I was the warden captain, I worked with the assistant chief at the time, was the chief now, Richard Felch in Whitefish. And they do actively enforce that. I mean, they have a lot of stuff going on. It kind of depends on work level. But they do issue citations for it. It's not, I wouldn't say it's something where they're issuing, tons and tons and tons of them, but they actually do go beyond the limits and issue citations. I don't know how this year went per se, but in the past they have to.
Yeah, thanks, Lee. Those communities have also stepped up to host bear fairs. And we had a big one, a couple in Whitefish, or a couple of big events where we were able to do some really great bear education. And we had U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service staff there who came and helped, and lots of other agency and NGO presence at these bear fairs, and Trails Fest that had over 500 people. And so kind of really cool to see these communities stepping up, not only with logistical things like bear resistant containers, but also promoting that education continually. And they are constantly sending people to the IGBC website and getting materials from us to deliver to residents. So another big part of the IEO efforts through IGBC is our grant funding program. We issue grants to support the many IEO efforts going on across all the ecosystems. And unfortunately, annually, we can never fund all the great work that's requested of us. And so we try to spread that money across the ecosystems and the projects as best we can. A couple highlights from last year, just to kind of let you know the type of stuff that all these agencies were pulling in funds or supporting. You know, we've got some pretty neat projects that we're supporting through IGBC. Swan Valley Connections, for example, up here in the NCDE, they provide community resources to promote coexistence between people and bears. And they focus on private property projects that help interested residents with materials, information, and then conflict response needed to secure bear attractants and then minimize risk of bear conflicts. They've used IGBC funding for the garbage container loaner program they've offered to community members. And these are free to community members to use out and loan out. They previously purchased containers for the program with funds pooled from a variety of sources, including the IGBC grants. In last year, in 2022, Swan Valley distributed 59 bear-resistant garbage containers to local residents, and they currently have distributed to date 404 containers and 28 dumpsters to community members and businesses. And a large portion of that is funded from thanks to IGBC. They've also assisted to date, they've assisted 34 landowners with construction of electric bear fencing, done lots of bear fairs as well. They're a constant presence at these educational events. So there's an example of our IGBC dollars going and really showing up in our communities in a really cool way. Another big funding project that we helped last year and have helped for recent years, Defenders of Wildlife. They use the IGBC funding to support their electric fencing incentive program, and that works directly with local residents, livestock producers, nonprofit organizations, small businesses, and government agencies on a variety of electric fence projects, primarily on private lands. And last year, or in the fall of 2021, they hit a milestone of 500 electric fence projects completed. And then to date, in 2022, they've assisted with 37 electric fence projects across their program area in the NCDE, and that includes 14 site visits with participants. An additional 67 individuals have been in contact with Defenders about participating in the program this next year. So really awesome, again, to see Defenders of Wildlife supporting a really important project using those IGBC funds. Other IGBC grants have gone to help support bear rangers with our national forests, and Kasanka Ranger District on the Kootenai has used IGBC funds to get a body out there in the Kootenai to go around and help with education, signage, and food storage, enforcement, or education. So those are some projects from last year, highlights that we supported. We just recently met as a group and decided how to fund for this next year. And again, it was really difficult because we received amounts requesting over $120,000, and we were able to support almost $42,000 worth of work. So you can see there's a giant need out there, and we try to support as much as we can, but it's not able to get to everybody. So we try to be really careful and wise in who we decide to support. Some of those highlights of who we'll be supporting this year is kind of similar to the city of Whitefish and Columbia Falls stepping up. The city of Missoula and the community here has really expressed interest in the Bear Smart program and really making their community bear smart. And so Fish, Wildlife, and Parks is going to work on, I got this right here. They're going to be working with community members and organizations here to make this community as bear smart as they can with bear resistant containers and other education efforts. And that's, again, a partnership with Missoula County Commissioners, Missoula City Council. They've all voted unanimously to support trying to make this community as bear smart as possible. So credit to them and all the groups that are helping make that happen. So we're giving IGBC grant funding to them. We're supporting Swan Valley Bear Resources conflict mitigation work again through Swan Valley Connections. We're supporting an effort, didn't organize my notes very well here. This is a neat new one that we are supporting, and it's with Trina Bradley. The Rocky Mountain Front Ranchlands Group is planning 2 workshops on using dogs to reduce wildlife conflicts in the NCDE. And Trina would like to host and organize these workshops, one in Augusta and one in Browning. And they're going to include all kinds of educational presentations and information on how they can reduce conflicts with grizzly bears. And we are supporting that effort with $3,000 worth of IEO funds. So again, trying to spread out our support as best we can in a variety of ways. It doesn't give funds to all the organizations that are trying to do great work, but we hope that they're able to still get that work done through other means. And I will open it up for any questions if anybody has any right there. That's just kind of a quick spotlight of a variety of projects.
You would have mentioned the IEO Summit.
Oh, yeah, 2024. So another amazing project that Lori's got going, and David and others, is we're trying to get another IEO Summit going in 2024. We held one here in Montana 3 years ago. Yeah. And we had lots of great participation. I think over 100 people attend that 2-day summit. And it's just a way to kind of bring all the groups and people together who are interested in bear education and reducing conflicts and keeping bears wild and people safe and through information education and outreach. And so that summit, I think, was a great success a couple years ago, and we want to just build on that and keep that momentum going. And I don't know if we've settled on the location or if that's still.
Yeah, we're hoping for Coeur d'Alene, Spokane area, and it's probably gonna be February of 2024.
Yeah.
Because it was in January, February, and last year that everyone thought that was a good time.
Yeah.
So we'll keep you posted. We have a good group. It's not just me doing it. It is the whole subcommittee, and then we have a lot of volunteers that have stepped up to ask, but it'll be great.
Yeah.
And it's gonna be, I think, 2.5 days. It's gonna be one a little bit longer.
Yeah, awesome. So if you'd like to be involved, let us know and stay tuned for more information. I think it's going to be a great event. And again, I guarantee I missed a majority of the great work and efforts that's going on. This is again just a quick flyover snapshot, especially with stuff associated with IGBC. So really appreciate all the support and teamwork that goes into all these efforts. Any questions? All right, thank you very much.
Okay, so we are a little bit ahead of schedule. I guess the advantage of doing this in person, for those who are in person, maybe we can go to lunch together or try to figure out some communication. So we are gonna break for lunch, and we'll come back at 1 o'clock and then have an update from our bear specialists from across all agencies. And then again, we'll end at 4 PM with kind of this NCDE Conservation Strategy 101. And basically what that is really diving in to what the conservation strategy is. We had a lot of turnover in this group within the last, 3 to 4 years. And so we thought it would be good to kind of just give a update of the conservation strategy and where we're at, and that can fuel kind of the conversation for the next day. So that was kind of the what we have ahead of us for the afternoon. So any questions or comments? We do have some time, so if we want to take any questions or comments from the public, we can now as well before we break. But any question or comments from the members before we kick it to any of the other folks in the conference? Okay, hearing nothing. How about any other questions, comments in the room? About online, Ivy, anything? Hands up online.
I do not see any hands up.
Okay, so the folks online, we will end up, we will log out because we're gonna leave the room. But I have no idea if anybody's around here where lunches are, or where, not lunches are, but where you can go eat, someone local. Anybody? Anybody?
Basically, if you head out to Broadway, there's a bunch of stuff along Broadway, and you could go left. Go out here, go left on Broadway, and go into town. There's a ton of places in town. You go right, there's maybe fewer choices, but they're kind of faster. So you can get lunch. Then the campus has student center, but it's really hard to park there, so I don't know that I'd recommend that. You can walk. There's a pedestrian bridge here.
Greg, I knew I could count on you. Thank you, sir. So again, if you want to group up, again, the advantage of being in person, if you guys want to group up and go to lunch together, that would be great. Obviously not required, but that's kind of the intention of this in-person meeting. So with that, we'll see everybody at 1, and we'll kick it off with the Bear Specialist annual summaries. Thanks, everyone.